Hey everyone, so in this episode we're going to go over actually implementing our Firebase authentication into our app. We already went over the last episode of all the features of Firebase, and now we're going to start actually using them. So the first one we're going to do is just email and password authentication through Firebase. So right now we have everything set up from the front end perspective of it, but right now all you have to do is type in anything in the email field and then it logs us in. So that's obviously not sustainable for an actual authentication. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Firebase, and if you haven't already, you're going to want to create an account like we went over the last video. And then when you go to authentication, we're going to go to sign in method and then email and password. If it's not already enabled from the last episode, you want to enable it now. There's also the option to do an email link without a password, but that's a little bit more complicated. You have to like create your own server, I believe, to receive the email. I don't know, it's a little too complicated for right now, but we just want regular email and password, and then we're going to save that. And then you're actually going to go to the documentation for Firebase. So like I said last episode, we're going to use all the documentation for the web version. I know we're building an iOS app and an Android app, but the way this is structured, React and React Native, you're going to use the web version of Firebase. And so we're just going to go down the web, and then you could do password authentication. You can see it has documentation for all of them. So it's super easy to get started if you want to add any other login methods, like we're going to add Facebook in the next episode. And so it's pretty clear of what you have to do here. It's just calling firebase.auth.create user with email and password. Pretty self-explanatory. But before we do that, we actually have to add Firebase to our app. So if we go back to our project overview, and remember when I said you want to use our credentials, so I'm not going to click on it because each credential is specific to your app, and whoever has those credentials can use them to log in, use it as their own database. So I would keep those secret, but for you, you're going to want to click on this little web icon, and then it'll just give you an object, a config object. So you're going to basically copy and paste that, and you're going to create a file we're going to create a new folder called config, and then in that folder we're going to create a file called Firebase. And I already did a little bit of this already, so I didn't have to kind of go around showing you my actual credentials. So I created another file. You can see env.js, and then I'm just importing that file, /env. You can see that right here, and then I'm calling it env. So that env file is just an object with the same exact keys and values that were in my own Firebase application. And so I could just call them by env.api key, in the API key, auth domain, env.auth domain, and so on and so forth. The one thing I would point out, for some reason, Firebase doesn't give you a storage bucket by default, and like I said, we're definitely going to use that in the future for image upload. So maybe before you do this, click on this button, you're going to go to storage, and I already did it, but you want to get just like start storage instance. So all that does is it says, okay, I want to use this, and then that credential will be added to this little config object. That's the only one that they remove by default. I'm not really sure why, but that's how you get it added in there in the first time. So once we have that, once again, this is just an object with the keys API key, auth domain, database URL. Make sure it's URL all uppercase. That's a big difference. I mix that up sometimes. Project ID, storage bucket, and messaging sender ID. I'm struggling to talk today. And then with that object, and importing Firebase, you're going to do Firebase.initialize app. So this is a function that is imported when you import Firebase, and then you're just going to pass in the config object. And this only has to be done once, so make sure you can call this multiple times, but you only need to do it once, so I would only call it once because it's unnecessary to do it multiple times. And then we're going to export default initialize. So I'm going to import this into app.js because app.js is only called one time on load, and that's exactly when we want Firebase to load, one time on load. And so what I did was import Firebase from ./config/Firebase. And just importing this will call the initialize app, and then we're good to go. We have access to Firebase in our other components. That being said, if we want to say use it in the login, we still have to import the actual module Firebase from /Firebase, just like we did in our Firebase file. So exactly the same thing, just so we have access to this constant or this module Firebase. And then if we go back to the authentication documentation, we're on the login screen, but just as an example, we're going to test out this firebase.auth. And we're going to copy and paste that. And instead of this navigating home, we're going to cross that out for now, and then paste in that same code. And instead of all this, I'm just going to console log the error. And we're getting the error, so firebase.auth.create user with email and password. We're passing in an email and password, so we do have to update that, because right now we are referencing email and password through this.props.user.email. So replace that, and then the same thing for password, and we should get the right credentials. And then they have a .catch, so if this fails, then catch the error, pass in error, and then we're going to console log what the error was. And just to see that in action, we're going to go back to our app, and we're just going to pass in an invalid email, so something random and something random. Oh, we're console logging, sorry. Let's alert it instead, because we console log it and it'll be in there in our console, but I want to see it on the screen. So once again, random, random. So this is a good error. The email address is badly formatted. That means it's at least hitting Firebase, seeing that our email field is invalid, and then giving that error back. So if you get another error message of Firebase can't be found, that means that you're probably not either initializing the app in app.js, or you're not importing Firebase into this actual component to be able to call Firebase. So one or the other, I would keep that in mind. So now we're going to try an actual email. So all it checks is the email format. Oh, okay, see, now we're getting good errors. Longer password. Nothing happened. That's a good thing, because if we go to Firebase and go to authentication, we could see our email at email.com. So we successfully logged in to our application through Firebase. It didn't show anything on the front end because we're not doing anything on the front end once we succeed. We're only doing something on an error. So you can see, you could do on succeed, you could do .then, but we just did .catch. So we're only doing something if there's an error message. And so in the next episode, we're going to move this functionality into the action function, and then implement the same functionality in the sign up flow. So right now we have create user with email and password. In login page, instead we want sign in, not create. So we're going to update that, and then we're going to move this to this sign up page and create actions for both of them. So I hope you join me. See ya.